The story of Peter George and Rose de Souza, their family and legendary home, Oorgam House. Peter George de Souza was born on 7 September 1874 in Shimoga. He moved to Bangalore around 1890 to pursue a degree in arts in Central College. He then obtained a degree in law from Madras University and became a member of the bar in Shimoga. He qualified for the Mysore Civil Service in 1901 and then returned to Bangalore when he got in as Assistant Commissioner. Peter George de Souza served the government in various capacities. Under Secretary by age 35 years, Chief Secretary 1924 to 27, Member of Maharaja of Mysore Council from 1930 to 31, Member of the Legislative Council 1930 to 33, and Director of Industries. He was awarded the title of Rajyakarya Pravina in 1928 by the Maharaja of Mysore for meritorious service in government. Rose Narona, born on 11th October 1890, was the eldest of 5 children: Rose, Charles, Sophie, Mary, Margaret, of Gregory and Matilda Narona. She lost her 2 youngest sisters in childhood and her mother died in 1898 when she was around 8 years old. Her father, Gregory, then remarried Pulcheria Coelho a year later and then he passed away 2 years after that. Pulcheria brought up the 3 children, Rose, Charles, and Sophie, to the best of her ability despite financial difficulties. Rose had her early schooling in Fourth School and later in Good Shepherd Convent, Bangalore. Spirituality and the Bible helped her through her difficult childhood. In 1929, she became a lay nun in the Order of St. Francis de Sales and presided over the order till 1982. She was nominated member of the Legislative Assembly of Mysore from 1936 to 37. Peter George and Rose married on 28 September 1910, 5 years after the engagement, as PG had family obligations to meet. Their nuptials were at St. Joseph's Church, Fort, Bangalore, with a reception at South Public Square, Baswanagudi. Rose wore a satin lovely dress made by Lalji of Commercial Street with an orange blossom wreath on her head. A long veil was carried by flower girls Doris and Flossie Perez. Sophie, her sister, was the bridesmaid. This was as described from Rose's unpublished memoirs penned in 1984. The picture shows the couple with PG's family on their wedding day. The names are as noted by Rose on the reverse of the photograph. After marriage, the PGs lived in a house in the Fort area where Matilda, Tilly, Victor, Sunny, Gerald, Jerry, and Mary were born. They moved to Leanhurst opposite the Bangalore Club where Muriel Bulu was born. In 1917, as the family grew, they were looking for a large house when Deshmukh Shama Rao offered them his property on 8 Sheshadri Road for Rs 9,000. This was Urgam House. Urgam House was originally owned by Mr. Lavelle, who was presented a large piece of land on what was then Sheshadri Road by the Maharaja of Mysore for discovering the Urgam mines in Kolar goldfields. Urgam House was built by Mr. Lavelle as an annex to his home Ascot House to host a ball for his son who was visiting from England. It was originally called the Pavilion. After Mr. Lavelle died, all his property, except Ascot House, was sold in an auction in 1907. It was bought by Mr. Deshmukh then for rupees 4,500 and sold to P.G. D'Souza, his friend, for rupees 9,000 in 1917. Mrs. D'Souza, you are going to have a big family. You must buy a big house for them, were the prophetic words from Deshmukh Shama Rao. In her memoirs, Rose writes that Mr. de Cruz, a friend of the PG's, renovated the house for 5,000 rupees. He knocked off the front porch, which was like a cattle shed with red tiles, she says, and built the handsome one it has now. Cement had just come in then, so he cemented the whole house, which had only a mortar floor covered with bamboo matting. We had Mr. Lazarus de Silva living with us, Rose says in her memoirs. He helped Mr. de Cruz with the ornamental floor. He bought bags of broken crockery and made a tree pattern which he placed on the cement, and the drawing room, veranda and dining room were all decorated by him and the masons under the supervision of Mr. de Cruz. Urgam House was originally about 2.2 acres in area. In 1919, the area increased to around 4 acres with purchase of additional land from Mrs. Stingy, Lavell's daughter, who lived next door in Ascot House. True to Mr. Shama Rao's prediction, by 1928, PG and Rose had 12 children. By 1930, the family had grown to 14 children. Their last child, the 17th, was born in 1936. This picture shows PG on the extreme left and Rose on the extreme right with their 17 children. From left to right, Matilda, Victor, Gerald, Mary, Muriel, Terence, Irene, Octavia, Xavier, Augustine, Anthony, Joseph, Alphonse, Corinne, Noel, Louise, and Blanche in Rose's arms. Rose took great pride in her large family. In the 1950s, much against their wishes, she persuaded her husband and children to take part in a competition for the family with the most children, conducted by the American company Corn Products Corporation. It is our duty to show that it is possible to raise a large family, she says in her memoirs. It was no surprise when the PGs won the prize of rupees 500 and a few hundred rupees worth of products from the company. Soon, the next generation came along. Meticulously documented by Rose in the family Bible, later by her son Gerald, the family's genealogist. Presently, the family tree with the progeny of Peter George and Rose, which was 17 children, 64 grandchildren, 118 great-grandchildren, their spouses and children into the 5th generation, is online. Oorgam House was the fulcrum of all family activity. The family was not financially wealthy due to certain financial adversities suffered by PG and Rose. However, they abounded with a wealth of love from family and community. Together with their zest for life, the large grounds and spacious rooms of Oorgam House were always filled with family and friends. And the clergy too, as spirituality was an intrinsic part of the family's values. Urgam House had 21 rooms, including bedrooms, bathrooms, storerooms, pantry, kitchen, a spacious hall, and a large dining room with a dining table that could seat 18 to 20 people. It had a handsome front porch, large back veranda, and many outhouses. The house was set towards the back of the grounds with a lawn in front and a long driveway leading towards an imposing front gate on Sheshadri Road, later known as Grant Road and now Vittal Malya Road. The fowl houses, piggery and cowsheds were located behind the house, while a stable for a horse and carriage was located to the right. There was a tennis court on the left of the lawn and large open spaces on the right where children played hockey, football and cricket. A large pond was located beyond the tennis court near the front wall of the property. Rose and Peter George had a menagerie of animals and birds. They filled the land with flowering and fruit trees. All this is best described by their son Gussie in his book A Rose for Harmony, where he says, "Rose and my father filled the garden with all kinds of fruit trees, including a grapevine on granite pillars and supports. There was a muddy pond for Mummy's geese and ducks and a cattle shed. Besides the tennis court, there were places where we played cricket, hockey and gilli-danda. The memories of the 5 gigantic and hoary old rain trees lining the driveway, a huge pink canopy in the monsoon, the 4 stately silver oaks bordering the tennis court and 2 tall white eucalyptus trees evoke nostalgia words cannot capture. A description would not be complete without mention of the glory of 4 Mayflower trees, real flame of the forest or gulmohar, in full bloom, or the exquisite beauty of the mauve jacaranda, nor the pretty honge lining the drive near the gate with tiny flowers like dirty snowflakes covering the trees above and showering the road below with a purplish white carpet that squelched as we trod on it. A jasmine bush outside Mummy's window made this scent always remind us of her." Here are some choice pieces of furniture from Oorgam House. As well as paintings and artifacts which adorned the house of many family members even today. The PGs owned farmland referred to as the lands in Hosakerehalli village on then the outskirts of Bangalore. It was on this land that they cultivated rice, sugarcane, vegetables and fruit. It was the family's picnic destination. Bullock cart, bicycle and tractor were the modes of transport through the years. Fishing in the stream, trekking and bathing in the lakes, as well as cricket were the highlights of a day in the lands. Community and youth empowerment were their mantra. In his official capacity, PG played a role in creating special facilities for the backward classes to obtain government appointment and educational concessions. The Catholic community also benefited from the schemes that PG instituted. Rose used her position as wife of a distinguished civil servant and friendship with leading officers and public men in the state to assist many convents and schools for girls to get grants from the government and to set up new schools in Chikmagalur and Shimoga. During her tenure in the Legislative Assembly, Rose was instrumental in initiating and getting legislation passed for the suppression of immoral traffic. Rose and PG believed that no one should go hungry or without shelter. They put the needs of others before their own. Rose's hospitality was legendary. Oorgam House hosted many an individual and family looking for accommodation. It was home to many people whom Rose took under her wing. They lived and worked in the house or on the lands. There was a retinue of home help, some real characters. The maids, Inasama, Upkara, Antoniamma, Lutz, Lakshmi, Kamin. whom Rose looked after as family. John, aka Cow John, who looked after the cows. Gangappa, alias Mutyagara, who sold Rose eggs during the day and robbed them at night. And other boarders in the outhouses who made life interesting. Liguri, the tractor driver, Henry, the odd job man who got drunk at night, Cyril, who worked in HAL but assisted with carpentry, and Naidu, alias Velaya Naidu, the drunk rickshaw man who faithfully ferried Rose wherever she had to go. After he retired from active government service, PG was nominated to the Legislative Council of Mysore 1930 to 33. His voracious reading kept him busy and he followed a regular routine of long walks and a strict diet. He started ailing from 1956 and became quite deaf. Rose helped him through this period by encouraging him to write the story of his life. He did so on the understanding that Rose would publish it not less than 10 years after his passing. Rose published PG's autobiography, Stalwarts of Mysore, South India, in 1975, 15 years after his passing. The autobiography provides a detailed account of his life and considerable achievements in government service. His analysis and observations on the achievements of the Diwans he worked under as well as their contribution to the development of the Mysore Presidency are perceptive, interesting and informative. Rose continued to reign as matriarch of the family after PG's death. However, maintenance of the large grounds was becoming increasingly difficult. So in 1962, the Oorgaum House compound was converted into a layout with majority of the plots owned by PG family members. Rose, although, remained resident in the main house. On 11th October 1980, Rose reached the venerable age of 90 years. Rose continued her outreach and open house concept with the help of the family as long as she was physically able. She became quite frail in the last few years of her life and breathed her last in 1986 on her beloved PG's birthday, 7th September. She was laid to rest in PG's grave in Hosur Cemetery, Bangalore. In 1989, Urgam House was demolished and replaced by apartments. Many of the apartments are owned by members of the PG de Souza family still. In April 2014, the family published a book on Rose titled Rose de Souza Precious Memories. The book, compiled from her unpublished autobiographical notes as well as memories of family and friends, describes her journey from losing both parents at an early age to becoming the wife of a distinguished civil servant, a nominated member of the Mysore Legislative Assembly, a lay nun, and a person whose approach to life was far ahead of her times. The book also captures the spirit of life in Oorgam House, where she reigned as matriarch. The family is now spread far and wide. To quote Genesis 28:14, "Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, and to the north and to the south, and in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed." Rose and PG would be proud that their family now, into the 5th generation, though spread across countries and continents, continues to uphold family values and treasures family history. They maintain a close bond, gathering for family events and celebrations, births, deaths, weddings, or any reason to get together. The family also continues the philanthropic legacy of PG and Rose through the Rose de Souza Memorial Trust set up in 2013. The tagline of the trust is Caring, Sharing, Empowering. Symbolizes its vision to reach out to the less fortunate irrespective of gender, caste and creed, just as PG and Rose had done in their lifetime. This presentation is based on information from Rose de Souza's memoirs penned in 1984, Rose de Souza Precious Memories, and Stalwarts of Mysore, PG de Souza's autobiography, as well as other family history documentation. Thank you.